Go back in time. The year was 2010, or maybe 2011-ish. During that year, I was a happy little kid. The Black Eyed Peas were taking over the radio with new hits, my mom still made food for me, and I would spend my Saturday mornings in the living room watching RedBubble Show with my cousins since they always came on an almost weekly basis. In the afternoons, we would play something on the old GameCube as well. We might have even gone outside to take a break, as two families in one, to go to the ice cream shop for a treat. School was simpler, as I was between the ages 3 and 7. As you can tell, life was pretty simple and happy. The only problem was that this time also had a fair share of hard and weird moments too. These include hallucinations and confusing episodes of childhood. These, I guess you can say, are some things that still bother me. These are back in the days. Looking back at our time, there were a lot of moments that I feel were too intense for us to experience as little kids. Have you ever looked back on certain things from your childhood and immediately think that those were very insane things for a little kid to go through? Well, I'll tell you mine. The story I'm about to tell you basically sounds like something out of an unrealistic story, but I swear to God, looking back on it, it just felt real. And this was when I was 3 to 4 years old. I, alongside my parents, was visiting a house of my mom's friend. I went inside, and I can recall there were a couple of other babies to play with. I was with them half the time. During that time, I was hanging out with them, watching Baby Einstein VHS tapes. And this was 2011. VHS tapes were sort of there, I guess. I know it already ended its course, but some people still had them. I hung out with the babies during that time, and I haven't reached the beginning of the story yet, but here it is. After I arrive, I walk upstairs with my dad, and in the hallway, there was this door to a room, and it had a poster on it of a guy with gray skin, and he had a head with no face. It was probably to a cover of an album, but looking at it, it kind of freaked me out, but I didn't really mind it most of the time, but still, I was a little spooked. And at this point, this was when my imagination kicks in. I don't think this actually happened in the moment, but it felt real. I slowly walk downstairs, and I look up towards the hallway. And the next part is intense. Somebody bursts out of that room. And the way I can describe it is, there was this guy with a mask on, but how I saw it, it was the same guy who was on the poster to the door, and he was speaking gibberish, but from what it sounded like, he was yelling, "Who goes there?" or something like that. And I'm terrified, and what made it feel real in the moment was how I reacted to it. I was freaking out, and I wanted to escape. Because as a 3 to 4 year old experiencing this, your quickest response is to hide. That's what I always did. Anything I didn't like, whether it was on TV or whatever, I hid. In my household growing up, we had 2 couches, one against the back wall and one on the left-hand side of the living room. This left a weird open gap that you couldn't go through unless you were able to get through it by crawling underneath as a baby. But straight to the point, that was my hiding spot back in the day. My quickest response was to hide as I'm freaking out. And the quickest way to escape to me was to get through and hide in my mom's friend's master bedroom. So I tried to run in there, but my parents basically grabbed and dragged me away, saying, "No, you can't go in there, that room does not belong to you," but I'm freaking scared. I remember trying to race into that room more than once, and I tried to get in there as fast as I can, and I remember being aggressive, or at least I want to think of it that way. I wanted to get into that room, but there was no way I could get in there to escape. So at this point, I give up, and I walk downstairs, still scared. So now, I'm in the living room, a little spooked. And in that house, I remember the window looked toward the backyard. Yeah, I'm still a little scared. And what I saw through the window was the same guy. He was in the backyard. He was walking by, and he looks at me. Or at least to me, it looked like he was looking at me. And it felt like he stared into my soul. I'm pretty sure I do more of what I usually told through this story. I run into the room, I try to escape, I try to do everything I can, but I can't fully figure out or understand the story or situation. But I basically freak out. And I guess my parents were like, oh, Jayce is probably tired. It's his nap time. We must take him back home. And they do. This is where the story ends. They take me home, I take my nap, and I was basically safe. And I was also at peace. But looking back at this story, it was crazy. It basically felt real. If you remember the story that way your entire life, it will make you feel like you actually lived it. You believe it. And it's just insane hearing it out of my brain. Now, something that upsets me was how I'm talking about my parents, didn't know what I was going through as a little kid. Like, you don't know what's going through your toddler's mind, what they're thinking and what they're going through. But at the same time, I don't blame them for seeing me that way in that moment. As a person with high-functioning autism, I didn't really talk that much anyway. But back to the topic as I look back on it. I still look back at it, not so much, but I still look back on it and say that sounds insane and unreal for me to actually live. How a guy was after me, trying to kidnap me or something, I guess. And I'm trying to escape, but my parents don't know that, and it feels like they're trying to deliberately take me to this guy. It was almost like something out of a horror movie, I guess you can say. I would just say that was too crazy for me to even live in my childhood, or something that lives in my childhood anyway, but at least I was out of that. But even though this story sounds crazy, my old moments from my childhood weren't always like that. Now, even though that was a creepy story, I moved on from that. I'm now no longer just a kid, but a teenager with aspirations. As a teen, I have inspirations of wanting to be in the animation industry, especially in the adult-oriented field. One of these roles I want to be in is be a writer. This is becoming a new me. This is moving on. Around this field, you not only get to be involved in the process of creating a show more, but you also get to create the stories as well, full on. It isn't just drawing or storyboarding in any way that I also want to do, but I also want to create the story too, be involved in creating the structure, the direction of the story, and how the characters talk. And Gary Janetti is one of the many writers that I look up to. I guess you can say he's a genius. If you don't know who he is, Gary Janetti is a writer who's most notably written for shows like Family Guy, Will and Grace. He's created a show called Vicious with Sir Ian McKellen, and The Prince, which is on Max. But Family Guy is where I first discovered him alongside The Prince. And he is just basically amazing. If you don't know him, you definitely know his impact on Family Guy. This is because he created Brian and Stewie, not the characters, but the duo. One of his first episodes that he's written for was the first Road to episode, Road to Rhode Island. And in the episode, Brian and Stewie go on a long cross-country trip back to Quahog. And during this time, they basically create a relationship between each other that has been going on ever since. And Seth MacFarlane has even credited Gary for creating the duo and for giving them a relationship that he possibly wouldn't have created in the beginning.
You can create a character, but other writers might be able to do something more interesting with it. And I think you see that all over television. Brian and Stewie is a good example. There's a writer, Gary Janetti, and the Brian-Stewie relationship, which is now so central to that show, was something that he really hit upon.
So if you see a Brian and Stewie episode, you can trace it back to him and thank him. And this is one of the great things I like about him. But it isn't just Family Guy. It's also his way of writing and telling stories. He not only has he written for television, he's also written a couple of other books. One I have, another that I don't have. The one that I have is Do You Mind If I Cancel? And the other one is Start Without Me, I'll Be Back in a Minute. And he, in each chapter is an essay that looks back on his life before he was successful as a writer. And they're just relatable and entertaining to read. Because not only is it entertaining, it also some of them also tell his story of working working his way up to becoming a writer and where he started from. And that's one thing that I like to take from him, is his story of trying to get to Hollywood and to become a screenwriter and producer in television. And one great thing about this guy is, of course, like I said, he's one of my heroes. And the best thing about that is I actually did get to meet him. I met him at the United Theater in February 2024 in Los Angeles, and over there I went to see his show. I was with my dad, and I'll tell you this, I actually did meet him before the show even started. Because, so you see, I was outside the theater waiting to enter in the building because it hasn't, the doors haven't opened yet, and the security is waiting for everybody to, forcing everybody to wait, just so that way they can get started. And surprise, surprise, I did not expect this, but Gary Janetti actually walks out the door for a while to talk to some fans and some friends about blueberry muffins. And I guess the way I want to describe it is I was awake, and my eyes just lit up when I first saw him. Like, seeing him in person, like just being in my surroundings, it's just a joy to me. He's just like a ball of positivity, and just him saying like, "Hey guys, did you bring any of my blueberry muffins?" It was just a joy hearing all of that, hearing that come out of his mouth in front of me. And during this time, some of his fans actually did get a chance to take photos. I didn't get a chance to take a photo, sadly, but I got something else. So, which leads to the next part of the story, this quick story. And while Gary is out there with his coworker on Will and Grace and a couple of friends who are fans of him, my dad suggests to me, "Hey, you should go out there. You should go talk to him real quick and maybe get your book signed." And I have my pen. I have my copy of Do You Mind If I Cancel with me. And I was a little nervous because I'll tell you this, before the show and this moment, I actually did get a chance to talk to him over the phone. It was cut off, but it was still a somewhat nice moment that I kind of cringe at somewhat. I did get a chance to talk to him over the phone first, but I was a little awkward, and I guess I was a little nervous. It's actually Jayce, by the way, but you can just call me True. Jayce, Jayce. So yes, it's a hard name to say. I get it a lot all the time. And just like last time, I am nervous this time. And I have my book and my pen, and I basically slowly walk there. I try to be nice to the other fans and not try to be a huge jerk, trying to be the first one to get something from Gary. So I basically just wait in line behind him, and it was just amazing and a little nerve-wracking to be around him because obviously he's a superstar too. I mean, he's a hero, he's a genius, he's a writer, awesome. I want to make a good first impression on him, and because I guess cute Tribe Called Quest reference, picture me messing it up. It's obviously something that you want to do. And I nervously wait for him, holding my book and my pen, and he's talking to his last fan. He's with his personal assistant. He's out there, and my moment comes after all the quick waiting. I'm nervous, and I don't know why I say this, but I guess just to set it up, he was about to walk back inside, and alongside his coworker on Will and Grace, who hired him, she was with him, and I was right next to them. Then suddenly he turns to me, noticed me, and he said, "Oh, hey, you want me to sign your book?" And I say, "Oh, God, yes." And I'm a little nervous. I give it to him. I give my pen. and he basically asks me a few questions, and it was like, oh, hi, what's your name? Well, that's cool. I'm glad you came to see my last show, because this was a tour, and this was the show that I went to was the last one, and he was just signing my book, and I guess he was able to spell my name right, Jayce, based off a note that I wanted to give him, but sadly I didn't. But at least he was able to take a look at it. I'm pretty sure he read the rest of the note. I feel like I wanted him to, but he was like, he signed my book, and after that he said, well, thank you, Jayce, for coming over. And the fact there that he said my name, and correctly, Jayce, was just something out of a dream. But obviously after that, it was over. But at least I was able to have a quick interaction with him. And I was just glad to have so much respect for him and having him in my surroundings in that moment. But after I meet him, we begin to walk into the theater, and I watch his show, and I have a great time. It's an experience that I'll never forget. So it was in LA, and a lot of his celebrity friends were there. He even mentioned in the beginning of his show, he mentioned that the majority of the Family Guy writers, who I actually knew, they were there too. Some other writers there I recognized.
Thanks for coming. A lot of my friends are here. A lot of Family Guy writers are here. Hi, Family Guy. Do you mind if I use that clip?
David Goodman, Artie Johan, Patrick Meighan, Mike Desolate, or Gary Janetti. They're all Family Guy writers who've written books and no one's ever heard of them.
Gary Janetti kind of rings a bell.
Yeah, he's got a popular Instagram, so he kind of broke through. But the rest of them, bunch of bitter, Emmy-less losers.
It was a great experience for me to have. And one of the things that he said at his show, after reading his essays from his books as part of the show, he got a chance. He gave some of the audience members to ask questions, and one of the questions that he got was,
how did I land my first writing job, and what inspired me?
I've already heard this, but just hearing him, but I wanted to hear it from him. I heard it from him again. His adult life with a series of random jobs. And after a while, he couldn't really take it anymore. So he decided to finally move to Hollywood, like you should, because being in the industry, you can get to what you want to easily. Since that's the headquarters of entertainment, you go there.
You know, I was working as a bellman in New York, and I was struggling and in debt, and nobody knew I was a writer, and I was 28, and one day I was just like, I have to get out of here, and I moved to LA with nothing. And I didn't know anybody, and I taught myself how to write these scripts by going to the Writers Guild library, and through a friend in New York, I got my script to an agency.
And he learns how to write, since he wanted to be a writer at the beginning of his adult life, and he learned how to write spec scripts, wrote some spec scripts, and he eventually got a job on a sitcom called The Naked Truth.
And I got a meeting on a show, and it was called The Naked Truth, and the guy who ran it and created it was Chris Thompson, who's no longer with us, but he created the show Bosom Buddies with Tom Hanks.
And one of the great pieces of advice that I like to quote from him, he basically said, if you want to be able to get a job in the entertainment industry, you have to be desperate. But don't think that you should say what they are thinking that you're going to say. Say what you want to say. So instead of saying something like, oh, it was nice meeting you at this meeting for this show, you should be more like, I like this job. I have a passion of being a writer. I want this job. I would do anything to get this job. You gotta beg and be desperate.
My first meeting that I ever had, and I was in LA for 6 months, and I was literally about to apply for a bellman job again at a hotel because I had no money, and I would avoid the calls of people, credit cards calling all the time, and I had this meeting, and in this meeting was the first one that I had ever. And I thought, I didn't know how anything worked. And I was like, there are two ways you could play this. I could be like how I think people are, and I could say, it was a pleasure to meet you, and be on my way. Or I could be honest. And I was like, I'm gonna go with being honest. And I said, I will work harder than anybody has ever worked. I know I can do this. I'm telling you I can do this. I love this script. I want this more than anything I have ever wanted, and I will, I can do it. And I got a call he hired me actually in the room, and I got a call that day with an offer from it. And it was the way to go, and that was my first job.
That's one piece of advice that you can learn from Gary Janetti. If you want to be able to make it, especially if you're a writer in the industry, you gotta be desperate, you gotta be hungry for it. Don't think what other people want you to do what you wanna do.
Either trust your instinct, to be honest, or be the way you think they behave in Hollywood. And I was like, I'm gonna trust my instinct. And that's kind of what I've done since then. Anyways, that was my first job, so I was lucky to get that.
Now, the other thing that I love about Gary is his stories. His stories were basically based off his life living. And that's what he wrote in all of his essays. They were basically based around experience, since they were based around his younger self, around his younger life. And to me, it's relatable. And he's actually used some of the jokes in his stories and some of the experiences from his past in something like Family Guy, because one joke. So this is from the episode that he wrote. It's called Brian's Play, and Stewie is in the theater. He's about to watch Brian's theater play, and he has the playbill, and he is going through it, and he finds and Stewie is reading the cast listing, and then he finds a small piece of paper, and it's with that night's cast. It's not the original cast, and Stewie's disappointed.
Let's see, who's in this thing? Sad, nobody, sad, nobody. Victor Garber. That's pretty good. How did he get Victor? Oh, of course, tonight is Randall Evan Battencourt. God, I hate understudies.
Well, that was based off an experience when Gary went to see Evita Broadway back in '78 with his sister. And it was not the original Broadway cast, it was a replacement cast. And he was disappointed and angry, and you could actually feel it. The way he told his stories out through his voice was not the way I read it when I was reading it myself. He's basically the only one who's experienced it. So the way that he says it, he words it, and basically delivers the lines, he's the only one who could be able to do it, because you can feel the anger in his voice.
In the minutes before the show starts, I quickly open my playbill to read Patty's bio when a small slip of paper falls out onto my lap. Today's matinee will be performed by Nancy Opal. What? I shoved the paper in my sister's face. Did you fucking see this? Maria says something like, I'm sure she's just as good. Just as good as Patty? That's not possible. I have never felt such rage in my life before, and all of it is directed at Nancy Opal.
That's basically something that is incredible to hear. But back to the point, some of his stories are based on reality. And one of the great things about being a writer is that you, just like Gary, you take stuff from your past. And looking back on my old stuff, especially with the first story that I told you guys, I feel like I can be able to take, that means learning from most writers, including Gary, I can be able to take that past experience of me being scared by an unrealistic, imaginative episode of mine as a toddler and apply it to my own writing as well, which is a great thing that I would like to do in the future. But in the end, that's how I moved on, and look what I've become. I've become an aspiring artist and writer. Now, as I conclude this second story, I'd like to say a thank you message. To Gary. Hi, my name is Jayce. You don't know me or remember me, but I am a fan of your work. You are one of my influences. You're one of the people who have helped inspire me to be a writer, because whenever I'm trying to tell my own stories or write my own scripts, I'm trying to be like you. You have helped influence me in many ways that you have never known, and I'd like to thank you simply for that. From probably your youngest fan, Jayce L. True. Now, as our storytelling session or sessions actually come to an end, I'd like to spit out some more nostalgic speaking. or not, because I have a timer set up and it's almost out and the sun's almost down, but at least the lights are always on in our town, which means YouTube anytime soon won't be down. The reason why I mention YouTube is because I have a YouTube channel where I have a lot of drawing videos on there, where I recorded myself sketching and doodling art prints and t-shirt designs that I would eventually put onto things on my RedBubble account. Speaking of RedBubble, I'd like to thank and support them for helping me turn my designs into real merchandise. RedBubble is a website where you can set up your own shop, where you can sell your own items. Whether you're selling notebooks or t-shirts or any items you want to sell, you can always start an account for free. To start up one, you can go to www.redbubble.com to get started. But that's enough for now. I was glad to tell stories that I haven't told before, but right now I'm going to end it right here. Thank you for listening all the way to the end, if you did. This is something that I haven't really done before, and I'll probably never do again, but I'm just glad to have done something like this. I might even turn it into something in the future. But anyways, that's all for now, and I'll see you guys on YouTube. Peace!